Hi everybody, it's Daryl again, and this is how to grow plants from store-bought fruit and vegetables. So if you're in a place where you can't currently buy seeds and you want to plant a garden, this is particularly apt for the Northern Hemisphere. Here's some stuff. So I'll just read and chat. So after all the panic buying, which for many people was the right thing to do, except for the toilet paper meme, because the toilet paper thing got out of control. Um, yeah, that was funny and odd, and uh, I know people in Australia who still can't get toilet paper, and I think it's been a month. Anyway, the next thing for the West and other places is that the food supply is going to get a bit tight. So um, I made a few predictions about the coronavirus a long time ago, and it basically played out kind of how I just thought it would. So that's why I'm going to tell you about the food supply. So they're going to politicians and people are going to say that there's no food shortages, but it's quite obvious that there are. Like in New Zealand, it's pretty difficult to buy flour right now, and I don't think there's been any flour in supermarkets for a month. I heard that some supermarkets now are getting more flour in, but I don't know where they're getting that from. And who knows? Anyway, rice sometimes disappears off the shelves and pasta, and most supermarkets in New Zealand instituted a two of any item kind of policy to try and stop the supermarkets getting emptied out. But I haven't been to the supermarket in a month now. I did one pickup order. Anyway, um, it is time to do anything you can about securing your food supply and your neighbour's food supply. If you've got food and your neighbours don't, that's not going to work for you. You need your neighbours and the people in your neighbourhood and your city and your whole country to have food. So this is my bucko 5 on that. Um, your garden is pretty worthless if your neighbours are starving, so set them up too. Acquire seeds and start planting. Um, What you need are the starchy vegetables: roots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans, peas, pumpkins, plus cabbages. Tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuces, and herbs and salad stuff are nice if you have the food calories to go with them, but they're only a supplement to the starchy vegetables in many ways. Um, if you've got real food shortages, green leafy vegetables aren't going to cut it for calories, and nor are tomatoes and cucumbers. Um, the good thing is that you can grow many of these vegetables from the vegetables themselves. So if you're in a place where you can't buy seeds, this is what I'm telling you. You can buy a whole pumpkin, or sometimes they're called squash. Um, but what is called squash varies from country to country. So the things that we call pumpkins, yay big. Um, those pumpkins, there's heaps of good calories in those, and I think because that's got the orange, it's got vitamin A too. So dry out your pumpkin seeds. So whenever you open a pumpkin right now, wherever you are all around the world, you need to be saving the seeds out of those pumpkins. Pumpkins are a really easy way to grow phenomenal numbers of calories. Potatoes, of course, are the hugest winner. Um, Hard grey pumpkins, crown pumpkins, they can keep for many months when cool and dry. You can just put them on the floor in your garage, or any other, got a basement or something, put them on shelves in your basement, something like that. Butternut squash, so there's butternuts are a pear-shaped, kind of light yellowy kind of pumpkin, and there's the soft-skinned green buttercup pumpkins. The green ones, because they're soft-skinned, they can damage easily and they don't necessarily store as well. At least that's my feeling on that. But the grey pumpkins and any kind of hard, kind of slightly more glossy skinned pumpkin, they store better. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, buy pumpkins right now and get the seeds out right now. Just dry them for a few days and then plant them in your garden in the spring, which is now. So if you're in a place where you normally have frosts and snow and that's past, plant your pumpkin seeds now. If you're still getting the odd frost or snowfall, there's been another round of very late snowfalls this year. The last 3 years have had rounds of late snowfalls in some parts of Europe and United States and Canada. So that's shortening down the growing seasons. So you've got to be aware of that. So you can start your pumpkins. Pumpkin seeds grow really quickly into plants. So you can plant them on your windowsill in pots. Grow them in anything you can. Steal the soil out of your house plants. Get your yogurt bottles and your any plastic bottles from any food items and put some soil in there and plant your seeds. Dry your pumpkin seeds for a few days and then plant them in the spring, which is now, and harvest the pumpkins in autumn. Plant about a third of your yard space. If you've got, like here in New Zealand, we tend to have quarter acres. A lot of people have sort of eighth of acres, but you can grow quite a lot of food calories on quarter acre backyard, the backyard of your quarter acre section. What's a quarter acre? It's 50 by 20 meters, I think. Yeah, just mow your lawn and dig some holes where the pumpkins are going to be planted. Put in some fertilizer or manure if you have any. It's really easy. And then just let the pumpkin plants sprawl out over your lawn and quit mowing your lawn so let the tendrils of the plants grow out over your lawn and don't mow the tendrils of the plants. And the plants will sprawl out, and in the autumn the plants will die away, leaving you with a field of pumpkins to pick up. And if you're just careful about, you can either cut the stem very carefully, or if the plant dies away, you can just break off the stringy bits of the plant. But you don't want to scratch the pumpkins. If you scratch pumpkins, they won't keep, and you don't want to bump and dent them either. Yeah, you can grow several pumpkins per plant. Plant about a third of your space in potatoes and sweet potatoes. You can propagate potatoes just by planting the potatoes directly in the ground. If you buy a few different kinds of potatoes, so like in New Zealand, you can typically buy like 8 different kinds of potatoes in a supermarket. You can buy small boxes of fancy potatoes with particular properties. You know, just get whatever you pay. If you're going to face food shortages, get any potatoes you can, and any sweet potatoes as well. In New Zealand, sweet potatoes are called kumara. Um, Dig up your useless lawn and plant potatoes now. If you buy big potatoes, you can cut them into pieces. Each bit about it. If you got a potato yay big, cut it into thirds. Each bit, about the size of a ping pong ball or a golf ball or whatever. But if you cut them, let them air dry. Just put them in your house. Let the air dry out the cut surfaces of the potato, and that will harden. But then when you put those 3 pieces into the ground, you'll get 3 plants growing, so you can grow more acreage. And this is not very some. Then plant the plants. Okay, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, so when potatoes grow, what you want to do is you plant them low in the soil and then mold up the soil around the plants as the plants grow tall. So potato plants grow roots from the stems if they're in contact with soil. So there's, I don't know, what do you call them? There's cells that change into kind of root cells, where the potatoes will grow if you bury some part of the stem in the ground. there's ways you can kill off your lawn. So if you've just had a hard winter, then your lawn's probably pretty dead anyway. Just dig it up. But you can kill off your lawn by placing anything light-proof over the grass for 2 weeks. So if it's hard work for you to dig up your lawn because you want to convert it into a garden, just put cardboard or tarpaulins, anything light-proof, newspaper, planks, roofing iron. I have some old bits of roofing iron. That is, it's aluminium actually, and I put those over bits of my lawn when I want to kill pieces of my lawn to turn it into a garden. Um, and so if you exclude the light from your lawn for about 2 weeks, the grass really dies, and then you can just dig it up much more easily because the grass has died off. If you cover over your grass for a month, it will be very dead. Um, Anything light proof. You can be starting your plants from seeds or cuttings or whatever while you're waiting for your grass to die. Uh, um, Plastic supermarket trays that cookies and items come in from the bakery, or washed meat trays. So we get these plastic trays in New Zealand that they have all these tiny little pockets in them. They're just solid clear plastic. You can wash those out, but they're good because they're not porous, but they have pores in them, so that when you put your seeds and stuff on the trays, like pumpkin seeds, they can get air under them a bit more easily, and they dry better. Of course, you can always dry. I always dry seeds from fruit on paper towels, and then if you just spread out the seeds over the paper towel. One way you can kind of propagate those seeds is actually just to cut or tear the bits of paper towels into the pieces, and you can plant the seeds. You can plant the paper towel in the ground even. Turn over your seeds when you're drying them and let them dry on both sides. If you have no yard space, you can still grow potatoes in plastic bins or buckets or wooden boxes. Anything that contains, about 20-30 centimeters of soil, about a foot or something. And you can grow potatoes in there pretty happily. Potatoes grow really well in buckets usually. Just whatever you grow things in, you always have to have drainage holes near the bottom to let out excess water, because no plant likes to actually stand in soaking wet soil. If you try to grow plants in soaking wet soil, they just die off because the roots don't have a good time. Which is kind of odd because you can't grow plants just directly in water, so that's kind of fascinating too. You can grow stuff in sacks of compost that you buy, just at a hardware store or a garden centre. In New Zealand, you get these 40-litre, are they 40 litres or 40 kgs? I don't know. The big bags, like a giant pillow of plastic with all the compost in there. And if you just pierce a few holes in the bottom for drainage, and then cut some holes in the top, you can actually plant your plants directly into those bags. So it's an easy garden. If you're going to do gardening and you want to just grow some salad greens or whatever, you can just actually grow them directly in those bags. It's pretty easy and tidy way of doing it. Remember never to don't breathe in dusty compost, because dusty compost can cause lung disease. Let's have a look. Just keep the soil damp, and after a few months you'll have a lot of potatoes. I always plant potatoes everywhere, all around my garden. Whenever I have spare potatoes that I don't eat or whatever, say I buy a big bag of potatoes and you forget about them, and a couple of weeks later you come back and they're all sprouted, I just plant all those in the garden all the time. So my garden just has dozens of places where there's random potatoes growing. Whenever I dig up the garden for any purpose at all, I almost always find potatoes while I'm digging up the garden. It's fun. So here's what you came for. So you can grow seeds from a store-bought cabbage. So what you want to do is you just get the cabbage like a ball, peel the leaves off, and eat those leaves as you peel it, and then your cabbage smaller and smaller and smaller, and when you get down to about tennis ball size or something, you'll have the bottom of the stalk it'll be cut off because they cut them when they harvest them. But that ball with the stalk under it, then you can just put that stalk in a jar of water, and it will usually start to grow roots from that. From that, if you've got damp soil outside, you can just take that ball with the stem and put the stem down in the ground, like dig a hole in the ground and just push the soil around the stem. And as long as you water it every day and keep that that the soil around the stalk damp, the stalk will start to grow roots, because most plants are able to grow roots on different various parts of the stems. And So once the roots get growing, then the ball of cabbage will start maturing, and the leaves will fold out, and then it will sprout a bit like a broccoli. Broccoli and cabbages are basically genetically really similar. Um, and then the flower stems will grow out, and bees should just come along and fertilize those, and then you'll get cabbage seeds. And the cabbage seeds will grow in little kind of pods. Cabbage seeds are quite easy to handle. Um, Cabbages, Brussels sprouts, and kohlrabi, and what's the other one? There's a pretty much turnips and radishes are very highly related. They're all called brassicas. Um, they're easy to grow seeds from, and once you have them go to seed in your garden, you'll end up with generations after generations just growing from the seeds that spill out. They grow hundreds or thousands of seeds per plant. So that's the way you can get cabbage seeds. Yep, that's all that stuff that I just explained. Okay. Yeah, the stalk of cabbage plants have a lot of energy stored in them. If you're actually eating a cabbage or a broccoli, you can peel the stalk, and you can eat the pith that's on the inside of the stalk. It's very sweet. We used to eat it a lot when we were kids. I grew up in working in gardens, and yeah, I basically learned how to grow everything. Um, so you can get seeds. So um, you could potentially actually get broccoli seeds by carefully trying to grow a broccoli, but it's hard to grow seeds from a broccoli because there's not enough of the plant left for the whole process to finish off. Um, and most of the broccolis these days are sold without any leaves on the stem at all. Um, I've muddled around with whether you could cut off 90% of the broccoli head, leaving just the stem and some leaves, and see if you can get that to sprout, but I haven't had much luck that way. Um, oh yeah, you can, if you don't have bees, bees should just come into your garden if you're in a place where there are bees, but you can hand pollinate flowers with a soft brush. So if you get a really soft paintbrush, I think there's some kinds of fluffy kind of makeup brushes, quite feathery kind of a brush is what you want, and you can brush flowers, and you can pollinate other flowers just by brushing the pollen from flower to flower. Um, Broccolis and cabbages have very fine little yellow flowers, so it would be a bit painstaking to do that. But you can. I've hand pollinated fruit in an orchard as a job. People do that sometimes. Um, Corn, yeah, corn's another really good calorie dense thing, and it can preserve quite well in some ways too. So if you just buy store-bought um, sweet corn, like so in New Zealand right now, if you can get sweet corn right now or anywhere in the southern hemisphere, um, if you get the more mature cobs, so sometimes you know corn cobs are harvested a bit late, so they're actually quite mature. They don't really taste that great. Um, if you just dry those corn cobs out quite often they'll have viable seeds. So I've grown corn plants from store-bought sweet corn a few times, um, and just to see if I could. But if the sweet corn's not mature enough, if it's quite young and sweet, if the kernels, if a lot of the kernels on the corn cob, quite often you get the thing where the kernels on the stem end are quite well formed, but the ones at the other end are a bit small and pale. They're not fully mature. Alternatively, sometimes you buy sweet corn that's very yellow. Like when you peel it, it's very yellow. You don't have those mixed pale ones. Those darker, more plainly yellow corn, those sweet corn are probably more viable. And you can just dry those cobs out. So you can peel back some of the leaves. What I do, I think to leave it to mature, but you can just leave it out of the refrigerator, and in a few days the leaves on the outside of the corn cob will dry out, and then you can peel back some of those leaves and hang up the corn cob, and the corn cob will just dry out. And when it's very dry, like after a few weeks or something, months, um, you can easily just break the corn kernels off by just sort of twisting your hands around the cob of corn, and the dry corn kernels will break out. You don't want to cut them off or anything. You want to break them out naturally, and that you can just grow those into corn plants. So you can get hundreds of plants from one corn cob. But the third of the corn cob that's closest to the stalk has the more mature corn kernels. So what you can do is you can break your corn cobs in half and eat the immature end now and save the mature third of the corn cob for seeds. Hybridization. So all sorts of plants have hybridized seeds. Hang on. And hybridized seeds don't grow true plants because they're made by crossbreeding two varieties or cultivars to create a new hybrid. And the hybrid cultivars or hybrid seeds revert back to some way towards either of their parents or their grandparents in the lineage. So you get weird results. So I like to grow radishes from radishes that I get just as radishes from the supermarket or usually from my mum's garden. And then I plant if I can't eat them all, I plant some of the radishes in the ground and just let them go to seed, and then they will revert to the prior forms. So the little round red radishes quite often revert to ones that look like carrots, which you can't really eat. They're really skinny and there's just nothing in there to eat. And they also revert back to daikon, the long Japanese long. It's like a cucumber-sized radish, which are very edible. They're really good. And of all kinds of radishes and turnips, you can eat the greens as well. So when the plant's young and growing, so like if I'm making just some instant noodles or whatever ramen, then I'll go out to my garden and take some of the radish greens, pick those and put them in the pot when I boil the noodles, and then you poach an egg in there, and it's a pretty good lunch. Um, so there's my tip for cheapest instant noodle lunch. Um, where else? Where do we get up to? Yeah, the mixed yellow and pale kernels aren't that great. Um, oh yeah, so yeah, sweet corn can also revert back to field corn or maize, and you can eat maize, but it's more floury. Like it's not good to eat like you eat sweet corn, but that's what people make tortillas out of, and I guess cornbread. Um, Actually, I do intend to make cornbread sometime in the next few days. I've never made it. Um, but I had it once when I was in the United States, and I quite liked it. Um, spinach, silver beet, fancy lettuce, and pak choi. Some of these, we get ones where this fancy lettuces are grown hydroponically and they actually have the roots on the plant. So in that case, you can actually eat most of the leaves off the fancy lettuce, but then you still have the plant. If you leave a few leaves on there and plant it in the ground, it will just grow into a plant and then it will seed, and then you'll get hundreds of fancy lettuce plants just growing around it in your garden. Or collect those seeds and grow them next season. Spinach, silver beet, and pak choi, these are all pretty easy. If there's roots, if there's some part of the root, like even on I've bought spinach, which have about 2 centimeters of root on the bottom of the spinach plants. Well, if you trim back a lot of the spinach plant, you can put that root in water and new shoots will grow and new roots will grow, and then you can plant that in the ground and let it go to seed, and then you'll have heaps of seeds for growing more spinach plants. That's just explaining what I just said. Yeah, when you transplant plants into the ground that have that are a bit short on roots because you've been regrowing the roots on the plants, you need to keep the soil really damp, but not soaking wet, but damp. Water them once per day. You don't want those very fine young roots to dry out because they'll just die. Irradiated, like in New Zealand, we don't have irradiated food much. I don't know if I've ever seen irradiated food, but in some countries, irradiating food is used as a preservation technique, quite often on things like capsicums or peppers or chilies or something. And some other, apparently a lot of spices are irradiated, but I don't know much about that. But irradiation kills it. That kills the seeds. It kills everything. It destroys the DNA in the germ part of the seeds. Oh yeah, I just wanted to say another thing. I haven't written this in here, but all kinds of beans, beans and peas, dried. So I've been to the supermarket and I bought heaps of different kinds of haricot, and you can buy I don't know if that's how you spell haricot beans. It's not the purpose. Spelling is not the purpose of this. Black-eyed peas, and all those kinds of I can't remember. There's various kinds of beans and peas, and lentils. Many of these are totally viable seeds, and you can just grow them. So you could even scavenge the seeds out of a minestrone soup mix. Sometimes they'll have viable beans in them. So sometimes that's a way to get seeds. You actually just buy them as dried beans and dried peas. Um, all of those, many of them in many cases are totally viable. So I went to a bulk food store where you just buy seeds out of bins, but they're meant to be for making, I guess you make baked beans or bean salads or whatever out of them. And you can just grow them, you can sprout them. So quite often I just sprout and grow those and eat them as sprouts. So you can eat all sorts of beans and peas as sprouts, or grow them into whole plants and then get them to grow you hundreds of more beans and peas. So that's another good source of seeds when you can't buy seeds. And now we're into kind of more fruit things. So watermelon and rock melons usually have viable seeds in them. From memory, that there's different kinds of hybridized watermelons. Just try growing anything you can. But there's like sort of like little round bowling ball green watermelons. They usually have totally viable seeds. I was trying to remember, there's one called Sugar Baby. It's a kind of a variety, and they're a true variety, and you can just grow more watermelons from those seeds. But I think almost every kind of watermelon with seeds can grow more watermelons, and so can rock melons or cantaloupe. Is that how you spell cantaloupe? Yeah. And those green melons, honeydew melons. Yeah. you can grow the seeds from all of those. Zucchinis and courgettes are all immature, so they're not fully grown fruit, so they don't have viable seeds. But fully grown marrows. So when you get a zucchini, they're like, where's my camera? Yeah, about that big zucchini, and maybe this round. But they fully grown marrow is like huge. They're like half a meter long, and they're this round, and they have viable seeds. They're pumpkin size or even bigger than pumpkins, and they have viable seeds in them. The seeds are kind of a little bit hard. You eat the seeds in a zucchini and don't even notice the seeds. All kinds of bell peppers and chilies all have viable seeds. So if you can just eat the capsicum or the pepper or the chili and take that little core out of the middle, it's got all the little seeds on there, and then just leave that out to dry for a week, and then those seeds will just flake off from that middle of that core, and they're totally viable, and you can grow more plants from those. Um, oh yeah, and then trees. So many kinds of ripe fruit have viable seeds. Apples, pears, cherries, plums, peaches, and nectarines. They're easy to grow. You can even grow pine nuts if you can get ones where each kernel has the whole husk, the shell. It's like a little hard nut. I grew some pine nuts. I planted 8 seeds and got 4 trees. It was pretty easy. That was the easiest thing to grow. You just have to plant it in a damp, cool soil somewhere, and you'll end up with a little mini, cool little Christmas tree. Apples and pears take 7 to 10 years to grow fruit. I've got some apple trees that I've grown from scratch myself, and I've just grew a whole bunch more apple trees over the summer. And yeah, so that's not going to solve your starvation in short term. Yeah, they're easy. Just eat an apple, pull the seeds out of the apple core, plant those seeds straight into some damp soil, and a week later a little sprout will come up, and there's your baby apple tree, and then that will grow. Cherries and plums and apricots and nectarines, so all the stone fruit. You grow those by putting the seeds into soil in the winter in pots. So I just put them in pots of potting mix and put them outside, kind of under my apple tree, in the shade where it's sheltered from the weather. And when the winter's finished, the those seeds will just they'll just germinate if they're gonna germinate, and you'll get little trees growing. So they can they're very various ability to grow. I've heard some people say that they crack the apricot seeds, but I don't know about that. Nectarine seeds just seem to fall apart. Plums are real easy to grow as well. If you go to anywhere where there's a big plum tree, quite often you'll find baby plum trees. Walnuts grow really easily as well. Just put those in a pot. Plant some walnuts in a pot. If you are growing walnuts though, things that steal walnuts will dig them up and take them away. That's one thing to be aware of. If you've got squirrels or something. Yeah, it's pretty easy to grow a lot of things, but it is interesting that you can grow vegetables and food from the things that you just buy at the supermarket. Yeah, so if you're in Northern Hemisphere now, plant some potatoes, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. Those are the ones that will get you the huge amounts of calories. And then the other root vegetables, carrots, turnips, parsnips, swedes, radishes, anything where you eat the root of the plant, because those are high in calories, because those are energy storage things. The way those plants work is they store all of the energy in the root while the leaves are growing, and then when the root's fully grown and the summer comes to an end, or the season comes to an end, or the weather changes or whatever, then summons all of the energy out of the root and grows a big spur, and then that has the seeds on the top. Carrot flowers and parsnip flowers are quite pretty. Now I'll just give you one warning. Some people are allergic to parsnips. They give you a rash. When I was a kid, I, there was some parsnips growing in our garden, and I brushed my arm across them, and I got blisters come up on my arm from the parsnips. They have quite they're a bit like needles, so just watch out for that if you've never touched the top of the greens of a parsnip plant before. Just be careful. Some people might be quite allergic to those. Anyway, that's just some information. So that's how to grow plants from store-bought fruit and vegetables. Yeah, I think that could be helpful for some people. Seriously, 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 if you are in the Northern Hemisphere and you have gardening space, grow some food. Like it's really, my estimates is that the United Kingdom does not make enough food by 10% to feed its population. So I think that there's going to be real problems because there won't be enough farmers and gardeners growing as much food as they normally do in all the Northern Hemisphere countries. You shouldn't really have to worry about this in the United States. The United States has about 40% of all the viable farmland in the world, well, Canada and the United States combined, and they have very good transportation systems. So you will not be able to buy the foods in supermarkets that you're accustomed to generally buying. Things are going to go into shortage in a major way very soon, and you just need to start growing stuff. Get your neighbours, friends, and family. Everybody who's got a backyard, everybody who's got suburban cities and towns or whatever, you should be filling up your whole backyards. Like it's spring right now, plant all those summer things. Corn, but especially the pumpkins and potatoes, sweet potatoes, helps a lot. Anyway, that's enough. That's too much talking. Thanks for listening, and be really careful out there. Give me a subscribe. Thanks. And a like. Yeah, a little thumbs up. Yeah, cheers.